Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys already know about the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and its effects, the cascading effects on two separate banks, and then the government kind of taking over the banks and, taking control of them. But what a lot of people don't understand is exactly why they collapsed. And, it took me a bit, but I found a really great and concise answer on what happened to Silicon Valley banks. If you're not familiar with what happened, essentially there was a bank run on these banks and they all collapsed. And the government took them over so that they wouldn't go bankrupt, and also so that people who put their money into the banks would be able to pull the funds out. But the one question that I feel like a lot of people didn't really talk about is why exactly did this bank run occur? They took in a lot of deposits, but they essentially pulled those deposits in, and instead of just holding them, they were trading them for bonds. Now, Joe Biden's Federal Reserve hiked interest rates, and that depreciated the bonds because they bought them at kind of at like a lower interest rate. And then on top of that, all the investors who had put their money inside of the Silicon Valley Bank started relying on Silicon Valley Bank more for their cash because, they were just getting less money from other sources. People who ordinarily would be going out and giving out money to fund these startups were kind of, getting wary of doing so, especially because of how the economy's been lately. Things have been a little bit stagnant. And of course, with the interest rate hikes, people are less eager to just give out money for free. And because these companies were relying more and more and more on Silicon Valley to give them the funds, Silicon Valley eventually ran out of actual cash to give out. So they ended up having to sell some of the bonds that they owned, even though they were depreciated. The downside of this is, because they weren't holding onto the bonds, they couldn't, wait for them to appreciate again so that they matched the amount of money that they used to be worth. Essentially, SVB accidentally burned the money of their depositors. It's kind of what happened. Now, I will say raising the interest rates was kind of like the catalyst for all of this. But one could argue that these rates couldn't be low forever. You can't just allow people to just keep on getting money for free without having to pay some sort of interest. That's kind of the gist of it. Silicon Valley Bank, instead of just holding the cash in cash, they were holding it in bonds that depreciated because of interest rate hikes. That's kind of a concise explanation of this. Will this continue to happen to other banks? I'm not 100% sure. But I think a lot of banks, especially the bigger ones, are pretty safe. But we'll have to see what happens, because these can have cascading effects to other sectors, of the economy, major sectors of the economy. For example, Roku, they had like $246 million stored within Silicon Valley Bank. And by the way, Roku has a major partnership with Walmart because Walmart hired Roku, so they help them make like dongles as well as smart TVs. So Walmart stocks could be affected negatively, but it's seeming like most of the effects are happening in the stock market, not in the actual checkbooks of America. So that at least is good news. It seems like the only people who are going to lose money right now are the investors. So Joe Biden came out actually and said that the Fed is going to, make sure that everyone who deposits their money into the Silicon Valley Bank will be able to get equal amount of money out of that bank. So that's kind of good news for the people who deposited. But Joe Biden was very clear. He is not bailing out the investors, nor is he bailing out the people who own the bank. Although, granted, they sold a bunch of stock and shares for cash, like a week or two ago. So they made out like bandits, quite literally. We'll see what happens. The stock market does greatly influence the economy, but it's not the entirety of the economy. It seems like a lot of people who are kind of, just normal everyday folks are not going to be too greatly affected by this, but we'll see if there are any sort of, contaminating effects. If this, spreads into other sectors and starts influencing other things like, the prices of various items that we actually buy, then you might see some very serious implications for everyone, not just investors. But for now, it seems like things are pretty much fine unless you invest money into stocks. So It's too bad. It's too bad. It's very unfortunate. But hopefully, people are going to be more careful with their money now, and things like this won't happen as frequently.